Many people talk about the ups and downs of married life, but no one really prepares you for life after your spouse passes away. Welcome to Widowhood Real Talk with Tina, a safe place for widows, widowers, and their friends and family to talk about love and loss. Find comfort as you listen to honest conversations between Tina and invited guests who've experienced the loss of their forever partner. Share their stories of love, grief, and healing. You are not alone in this journey. Join today's episode and discover a wealth of resources and learn how to connect with others who are traveling the same path. This is Widowhood Real Talk with Tina.
Hello, Dana. Welcome to the Widowhood.
Thank you. How are you?
I am well. When you hear widowhood, what comes to mind first for you?
Me?
Ooh, okay. And do you think you represent when people think of a widow, or what does that mean when you say me, if you were to explain that to somebody?
I just say widowhood is a state of being and a time. Everybody doesn't get to experience it. I was hoping that I didn't, and I did. And I know that in the beginning, the first few years, I referenced myself as a widow.
Okay.
And after that, I now just say single because I don't want pity because I'm a widow.
You make some really good points there. I want to circle back a little bit, but thank you. I'm going to keep those notes and we're going to come back to that. I see this space that you're at. It looks very light and airy. Is this your favorite space in your home?
Of late, yes. The
Okay.
last 5 or 6 months, my daughter had noticed that I had been spending a lot of time on the porch. This is my front porch, and it's closed in. And she made reference to that I could take any kind of space and make it mine.
Wow.
Even the front porch. And I was
Okay.
like, yeah, daughter.
So I'm a little jealous because the home we lived in before, we had a closed-in back porch where my husband and I raised our children. When I moved to Virginia, I've not had that option. But my desire for next year, there's a part of the house in the back that if everything goes well, I want to make a closed-in porch, patio, all-season room, whatever, because that was my favorite room in the house. I would start the day out there. I could watch everything and no bugs because everything was closed in. And in the shade, I felt like I was close to nature, but I didn't have to be out there with everything. So I am very envious of your favorite spot right now. I like that.
I'm kind of excited for winter to come and the snow to come and see if I'll be able to sit out here with the heater, if it'll be warm enough for me. It's insulated a little bit, but
Okay.
I think I need new windows and stuff like that. But
But it is windows, not screen. So it's windows there.
It's all windows.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I think I want to see some TikToks of you out there and seeing what that looks like. I think it's going to be great. I think it's going to be great.
Okay.
So where are you from originally?
I have to say originally Toledo. I was born in Oceanside, California, because my dad was in military.
Oh, what branch?
Marines, Camp Pendleton.
Oh, okay.
So my sister and I were born in California. She was actually born on the base, and I was born across the street from the ocean in Oceanside, California. My birth certificate says I have ocean blue eyes and jet black hair.
Really?
When I was a baby.
So are there any pictures with showing that for you?
When I was a baby,
Yeah.
real little. I couldn't put my hand on any right now, but I do remember an instance when my grandmother told me that. Well, my aunt told me when my mom brought us back to Toledo and she handed her to my aunt, and I opened my eyes in her arm and she almost dropped me. Wow. Because she was not expecting to see blue eyes, a blue-eyed baby. Yeah. So, and my eyes, I can probably get them kind of bluish if I wear pink, I found out. And my eyes change based on mood, on my mood. And my husband used to always say, he could tell, he would just be looking. I said, what are you looking at? He said, I'm looking to see your eyes telling me what's going on.
I know, I'm about to say, so what are the colors that they changed and what moods do they relate to?
Hazel.
Okay.
Is calm. Green is just where I'm just very spicy. And then blue, I think, is a more, not very often that they're blue. And it's a bluish shadish. It's not a blue. And it's only based on color. So I know that it's like if I wear pink or something like that, you'll see that hue of the blue. But probably never like when I was a baby.
Okay. Wow, that is so neat.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm gonna have to start paying attention when I see you. Make sure I'm paying attention to the eye color and what's going on to understand your mood and disposition. So much I found out just in a couple of minutes already.
Mm-hmm. And I found because of that, I talk with my eyes. I talk, my facial expression. So
Hmm.
I guess over the years, because my eyes have always been different to people, that I just use them as illustration. I just talk with them.
That makes sense. So,
Mhm.
do you resonate with water? I mean, being born near the water, but from Toledo, Ohio, like if you could pick like your favorite place, would it have water next to it?
I was sharing with you earlier that I had just came from swimming today.
Hmm.
And in swimming, I was teaching my cousin. And I was telling her what water does, how it calms you, and the different things that I would do just in lapping, going and doing laps. I would pray, I would quote scripture. So, as far as water, anywhere that there's water, I feel comfortable. I'm a fish. I love to fish. Sorry, my dog is barking at a neighbor. I love fishing. So, my husband used to say that if I saw even a pond of water, I was ready to fish. So, it's just not swimming, it's just sitting in it. I camped. We had a motorhome, so we traveled for about 15 years. And we could just pull the home up anywhere, a beach, anywhere, and just be. When we opened our front door, that's where we were.
Wow. So, how did you meet your husband, and would you share his name with us?
His name is John.
Okay.
John. I met him because of my best girlfriend he was her brother.
Did you guys stay
And
friends too? Your friend?
yeah, we stayed
Okay.
friends.
Okay.
She was at my wedding, everything.
Oh.
Well, not so much after he died because she wasn't ready for me to try to move on.
Well, hold on,
So
hold on. We're
not to
gonna wait. We want to get into. We don't want to get too far ahead.
Okay.
So,
So I met him going to visit her. She was a traveling nurse. She was in town. She was over to see her dad. So I went over to see her. And there were like three sets. So she was the younger set because he's 10 years older than me.
okay.
So I never really got to meet him. I knew his name and I knew she had older brothers. But because he was gone and already in the military, he was an army. He was in the army.
Go Army.
So
Okay. Good job.
I didn't really know him. I just knew his name.
Okay.
And so anyway, I went over to visit her, and when it was time to leave, she was walking me outside, and her brother and her nephew were standing out front talking. And I walked up on the conversation and introduced, and I'm just looking at him and say, hey, and I asked him a couple questions, and he told me he was going to school for nursing. I don't know, I was being flirtatious or something. And I said something about going to lunch or something like that. And my best friend immediately was like, no, made a little scene, like thinking like that's her favorite brother. I find all this out later. That's her favorite
Oh.
brother. And she didn't want to be in between that. And because I had a business at the time called Personal Touch Promotion, and I was having an event coming up, his other brother, the baby brother, came to me and said, hey, can I get tickets? And so I gave him my business card. So I find out this later that those two wrestled for him to get the business card. He took the business card, he looked at it. When he got home, he said, who does my sister think she is going to tell me who I can date or who I can talk to? And threw the business card on his shift rope dresser. And a couple weeks later, he came across it and he picked it up and he called me. And so that's kind of how it started.
Okay. How old were you and John about at that age?
I was 40 and he was 50 because the first date he asked me on was his birthday, his 50th birthday, October 4th.
Wow.
And when we went, I didn't financially, I didn't have money or anything, a lot of money. And I lived by myself here and just trying to make ends meet, have three kids. And I remember thinking, oh my God, it's his birthday. And so I made him a birthday card.
Hmm.
And on the date when he took me up to Detroit to Fish Bones or something, a famous fish restaurant up in Detroit. And I remember taking the card when he wasn't looking and sitting it in front of his water glass. And he never look at it. And he just kept looking at me. And I kept saying, why are you looking at me? And he said, I'm going to marry you one day. And
Day
that was on
one on his birthday. John was about it. Okay. Did he look at
and
the card? When did that happen? Or
He finally looked at the card when I pointed it out. He thought it was so sweet that I took time to make something for him. And then we ended up leaving the card. So he had to turn around and go back to the
Oh,
restaurant to go get it. Hmm.
so at 40, what
Hmm.
made you willing to date and make yourself available?
Because I had made a promise to God. 2 or 3 years prior to that, I had made a promise to God. I actually wrote it out and put it in my Bible and said what I wanted, a list of what I wanted, and told God that I would not be with a man sexually ever again, anybody, until I was married. And so those were some of the things that I said to him on that date. And it kind of made him like, whoa, where did that come from? Because by then I had a lot of stuff, tall fences. You had to jump really high to get to me. And I was just buying my house and doing stuff and taking care of business and my sons. And so he knew that story because I told him that on the date, just to let him know right off the bat that. And so because of that, he, when I found out that I loved him and he asked me to marry, all those things,
Okay, slow
he
down,
kept
slow
me.
down, slow down, slow down. You okay, hold on,
But I
hold
got
on.
to tell you that because he
Okay,
kept me away from him because of the promise that he knew
he
I had
honored
made to
that.
God. He
Yeah.
knew that he said, and he told me, he said, you're not going to have God mad at me. And so just to know the respect that he had for the promise that I had made when I was weak and said, okay, he was like, because he was scared. And so it was true that that never happened until our actual wedding day.
Wow. How old? Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for
Thank
willing to
you.
be so transparent.
Thank you.
How many years were you keeping that promise?
It was about 3 years, 2 to
Okay.
3 years. And I remember that when I wrote it out and I put it in my Bible, I lost my Bible in the church. It had been lost for like all those years. So a lot of people read my story or knew. So I had a really huge, huge wedding.
Okay. So,
This is just half of the wedding.
oh, the wedding
That,
party, you mean?
that was just the ladies. And the men
Wow.
are just, yeah, you can't hardly even get everybody on one, and the men's are over there, and then the men had one. And then we had a big wedding because people were asking me to be in my wedding. And at first it didn't click. But then when I realized and I got my Bible back and that letter was in there, the first thing I started thinking was, oh my God, a lot of people read this. A lot of people knew what I was thinking and what I was asking for.
And let's say you met a woman in her 40s and she said, I thought about being celibate till I got married, but I got to do what I got to do. What would you share with her?
I first would probably want to see where her beliefs were at
Okay.
and how much it had to be within hers. That's what mine was. Mine was a promise. So I'd have to find out where she was at. And then once I did that, I would just share a little bit of my story and say why it was so beneficial for waiting that I believe that I got what God had for me.
So
And
what
just in the one gesture of him not allowing anything sexually to ever take place with us to honor the promise that I had made was because of him.
so when you say beneficial, outside of meeting John, what were some other benefits that you found in being celibate for that time?
Not not getting involved in anything that was not worthy of my time
Mm,
because you could see it was just easy to spot. And then
okay.
a lot of people, when I would say exactly what I said to him, would run. So yeah.
It
And then,
eliminated.
and then the way you carry yourself too, I think I carried myself differently during those. I was very busy, very active. I didn't have time for anything or a guy really. So the guy had to weasel his way into my life, and that's exactly what John did.
No, I
I
think
heard
you
stories.
invited John to dinner or lunch. So John had an invitation. You didn't have to whistle too hard.
Well, I was just being smart. I was really just
Okay.
being smart based on he said he didn't have time to do anything because he was working. He was going to school for nursing. He was working two jobs. He had a regular job, a part-time job, and going. I was like, oh yeah, so you don't really have time to like go date or something like that. That's how it was. It was
Oh, okay. So
mhm.
what was dating John like?
Different when I find out all the backstory
Okay.
because he did a lot of things. He jumped through a lot of hoops to date me. And a lot of things were going on for him, like financially. His brother on our first date gave him $50 to take me to Detroit to eat, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and just different things. You know, when he came and showed up, he had roses, one rose, and I thought that was nice, and being a gentleman, and it didn't seem like it was rehearsed or anything.
Mm.
Other dates, he would go. He was the only guy of all those years, because I told you I had a business and it was called Personal Touch Promotions. So I worked with a lot of events that came into our city, plays and Def Comedy Jam and different things like that. And he was the first one that went with me on all these free tickets I had and showed up, went in the front row seat with me and sat. Where a lot of times when I tried to offer it to guys, or they would back out, not show. So
Wow.
that was, and when he went to the first one with me, it was me, my son, and him, and he took us to eat first before we went to the show. And my son told him at the time, he was only about 8 or 9. He was looking at me like, "Ooh, mama," And he said, then we found out he could cook. I forgot that part, but we found out that he could cook too.
Okay.
But it was. I can't say like I dated, but from the time I met him to a year later when we got married, it was a 10-month courtship kind of, with some stuff happened in that we had to, that I was going to break it off, and then
Well, girl, you can't say that and not tell me the tea. I don't know why you just mentioned that. I'm like, it's called Widowhood Real Talk with Tina. Now you can give me a slimmed down version, but you can't leave us like that.
well, it was okay when I met him, and then let's say 4 months in, when I realized that he was serious, because I still was being real shallow, keeping him at a distance. I said, okay, let's try to do this. Let's try to see if we can, really date. And I said, but I can't have nobody coming to my house, beat my door down looking for you. I ain't got nobody in my life and this and that. And I'm like, okay. And then he started painting my house. And he painted my dad would have to tell you this story, but he's no longer here. He painted my house with a 2-inch wide brush. And
Okay.
my dad said he did that so that he could stay around long enough. So
Believe your dad, because he could have had a roller, a sprayer. There's so many other ways to do that. Yeah.
so he was saying he was going on a fishing trip. He lied and said he was going on a fishing trip, but he didn't realize what he had in me was a detective and intuition and all other kind of stuff. And I listened. And so I had a guy in my life who told me everything he was doing and his daily stuff. And so I got to know him. So when the lie came in and I figured it out that he was lying, and then just you learn mannerisms.
Yeah.
I started learning that if he was lying, he would raise his voice and he'd get excited. And
Okay.
and so when I started learning those things, I told him, I said, if I did not know the truth, I would have thought that you were really telling me the truth. But because I knew you were lying, it was hard for me to distinguish the difference. But then when I started learning that you get really defensive and you get real crazy and loud, but I always paid attention to detail. I didn't know I was analytic until somebody
Okay.
had to tell me that. But all of those things played into who I am. And with him, I was wife, well, we didn't get to that part, but I was wife number 4.
Okay. And had you been married before?
This was my first marriage.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But I didn't know I was going to be wife number 4 till after he had asked me, we got engaged and all of that.
Okay. Okay.
But
Slow down. So he said he was going fishing.
he said, okay. And so, well, early on when at this time they had pagers.
Girl, I know.
I knew the phone number to the pager. I knew the pin to the pager because
Okay.
it was his birthday.
Okay.
So before I had committed to him, I periodically would listen to the text message or read the text message or listen to him. So it was one. And so, but it didn't mean nothing if it was a woman or something, because I didn't like him like that. He was just a nice guy. That's what I used to tell people. I don't like him like that. He's just a nice guy. And he's painting your house and he's doing this and he's coming over. He's taking the boys and getting their hair cut and he's cutting your yard and he's just a nice guy and you just like him, but you don't like him like that. And I'm like, but yeah, that's how I felt. So anyway, when I committed after 4 or 5 months in and said, okay, let's go for this thing and try to see if we can have a relationship, he was going fishing. Now, mind you, prior to that, he had already set this up to go to Kings Island in Cincinnati with this lady.
Okay.
But when I made the commitment and said, yeah, he had already made that commitment with her, but he didn't want to tell me. So he was going to lie and say he was going fishing. But he forgot I'm a fishing lady too. So he worked it all out like he was really going fishing and putting the stuff in the car and everything. But when I listened to the text message or the pager thing, she was on there saying I had to take Dakota to the vet and to the doctor's office or something like that, and I'll be ready at such and such. And I was at work. I remember I was pacing down the hallway, my heart was beating all fast, and I'm going, oh my God, what the heck? So now I know he's lying. So I call my aunt on the phone and I'm telling her and I'm crying and I'm like, I don't know what to do. And I decided I was just going to let him know that I knew. So I called him. I called him on the phone and I said, hey, so what time you leaving for fishing? I started questioning him and he was saying stuff. And so I said, okay, well, what did I say? I'm trying to remember how I said it, but I just said, well, I don't want you to have to keep lying because you remember we already had this conversation when I first told you we were going to get together. One thing I was not going to settle for was somebody who was going to lie to me and felt like I don't even care if you're not lying to me because you don't want to hurt my feelings. I said, hurt my feelings. Just hurt my feelings because I'd rather you lie to me I'd rather you tell me the truth than lie to me.
Right.
And so, what? I don't know what you're talking about. I said, that's all right. I'll let you know. So then when I come home and he was here, he was like pacing and going around stuff like, I told you I'm going. And I was saying stuff like, who you going with? I'm going. And then he started kind of stuttering and stuff. And I was just shooting stuff at him. I said, let me tell you something. I said, I'll tell you what. I'll meet you there. So now he's looking at me like, what the heck is she talking about? Because now I done got all the D or what was going, where it was going and everything. Because I called her and left a message on her voice message to say who I was.
You do not play. Come on, girl. So
anyway, he went on to go and I just told him, I'll see you there. And so I remember my aunt was like, well, we'll just ride down there. And then I remember thinking, I remember it was a conference that weekend at church. And I was like, Aunt Marcia, let's just go to the conference. I can't, I like him. I really like him and everything. And then I started trying to rationalize it. Like, this is probably something he had already had planned before, just trying to give him the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
And everything. And so he went on and he went. And of course, I get to hear the story later when it gets back. And it was so funny because when he got there, they were at Kings Island. And he said when they got there, the girl kept saying, like, even the next day, well, when are we going to the thing? And he was like, oh, we're going to go. And so then he says when he gets there, they're walking in and she's trying to hold his hand and he won't let her hold his hand. And so he said at some point he saw somebody at a distance that looked like me and he took off running. And so when she caught up with him, she was like, what is going on? He was so nervous that whole trip because he really thought I was coming. He thought at some point he was going to see me.
Right.
So for me, after he came back and we sat here and talked and I told him how I knew when I came from work. I came in from work. Well, no, that's not what happened. When they got back and she said they went into the house, he hit the answering machine. He dropped the luggage. And when he hit the answering machine, I was talking. I was on the answering machine saying, I know who you're with. I knew where you went, blah, blah. I don't remember everything that I said. Right. And all he did was just walked out the house, he said. He knew he was busted. And but for us to be able to sit and talk about it and share and talk, we really got through it. And he said, and I said, you're going to have to learn that you don't have to lie to me. I don't care if you feel like you're protecting me with it. Don't protect me, so.
That is important. And there are people dating and they have some non-negotiables. And I'm hearing your non-negotiable is not being truthful.
Correct.
You gave him an opportunity. And I love that You gave him a chance
I did.
because nobody is perfect. So John made that mess up. You guys talked about it. And going forward, did he hold up to being truthful and honest? Okay.
One time a year into our marriage, and again, my intuition and him lying. And he said he was going fishing. I guess he forgot about the first fishing lie he told me. But this time, he really loaded the car up, put everything in there, ended up throwing a little water to make it wet, to seem like he had really went fishing and everything. And he, when he came back, it's a whole long story, so I can't even tell you all that. But when he came back, he had told me, he called me when he was leaving there. And he was like, yeah, I caught this and that, and I'm getting ready to take it to the place where we would go to get the fish cleaned and stuff. So when I came home and I was being suspicious about something, the first thing I did was ran downstairs and looked in the dirty clothes hamper to check the clothes. And so the clothes that was in the dirty clothes hamper, because by now he had come home, I was at work or something. So he had come home and got laid down because he worked third shift. So he needed to go to sleep so he could go to work. And so I'm going through the house looking. So I go through the dirty clothes, and there's some white jeans. There's no way in HELL that he would have wore jeans to go fishing. Then I go look in the deep freeze for the fish that he just got cleaned. There was no fresh fish. All the fish in there was rock hard. So where was the new fish that you just bought? So then I go out to the car. So I go out to the car because he hadn't unloaded it. Look in there, and everything looked like he had really been fishing. So I'm getting confused. God said, open that bag up. I open this bag up where there's the rags and different things in that are at. Before he went on the trip, I had washed up all of the towels and stuff for him, because when he would catch a fish, he was always scared to take the hook out the mouth without putting a towel around it.
That is kind of scary.
He had gotten cut before.
Right.
And so it would have had blood. Clean towels. The towels were clean that were in that bag. But you've been fishing all day and overnight. So it just wasn't adding up. And so when he got up, I think I went upstairs and I think I tapped him. He was laying down sleeping. I tapped him. Oh, no. I had just run upstairs from the basement, and he came downstairs, and he almost ran into me. And I stopped him, and I took his hand and I put his hand on my heart. And I said, you see how fast my heart is beating? He said, what's the matter? What's the matter? I said, because what I'm about to say to you, I don't want to say. And he really didn't know what I was going to say. Well, what's going on? What's going on? I said, you lied. I said, no, you didn't go fishing. And he was like, what you mean? He kind of backed away from me. What you mean I didn't go fishing? I said, you didn't go fishing. And I had told him prior to that, if I ask you a question, pretty much I already know the answer. I'm just going to see if you're going to lie to me. So remember all of the evidence I already had.
Right.
I already knew what I was going to start throwing at him. Lord have mercy. When I got through with him, he was out of breath. And when I just told him, I started hitting him with stuff with, this wasn't right. And then I went to this, and then I went out to the car, and this, and now he's looking at me. Now he knows that. So then he sits down, he makes his way back upstairs, and he sits down, and then he starts to tell me another lie. Well, it was this girl at work, and da 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 da. And I knew he was lying. I said, that's not your MO, you're lying. And he told me your name. I said, okay, well, when you go to work tonight, I'll be there with you. No, you can't. I said, yeah, I'm going to go confront her. He was like, no. So then he said he was scared to go to sleep at some point, I think. I remember I came and tapped him in the morning. I said, okay, time for round 2, because I had prayed all night. That's what it was. I prayed all night to ask God to show me who it was.
Oh.
And God told me to go look in his car. I went and looked in his car, and in the ashtray was a cigarette with lipstick on it. And I knew the brand of cigarettes because the week prior to that, I had been in that person's presence and knew the cigarettes.
Close to home.
So I go back upstairs for round 2, and I tap him. And this time I take him some coffee. And the whole time I kept saying, Dana, you do not want to hurt him. You do not want to damage him. You do not, and I kept saying, I was talking to myself. And he jumped up and he looked at me and he was like, what you getting ready to do? I said, I'm just giving you some coffee so you can get ready for round 2. And so now Dana, I told you. I said, no. I said, God and I had a conversation. He took me directly to the source. So he knew, don't mess with me and God, all the way back from my promise to God. He always knew that my kid's boy's father told me a long time ago, if I wanted something from my husband, talk to God about it. If I wanted to answer, talk to God about it. Don't go to him, talk to God about it. He will get, and if you spend time with God, if God knows your voice and you know God's voice, he will speak to you.
Mm.
He will speak to you. So anyway, round two came. He came on downstairs and he sat down and I told him what I knew. He told me, yes, I was correct. And it happened to be a Sunday morning. And I told him, and how they became friends was, now this is crazy. He was a Sunday school teacher and she was a Sunday school teacher. And the director over the Sunday school came to me when we had first got married and asked me, was I okay with her being his assistant, working with him? Because she knew that she was single and she knew her reputation. So she was kind of warning me at the beginning, but I didn't know she was warning me. I ended up going to church that morning. I told him I was going to confront her, and I went to church. And I walked up to the classroom and I knocked on the door. And she came to the door all grinning and smiling and saying, "Hi." And I looked at her and I said, I know that you were with John.
So you go to confront her at church. I have a question. Why do women want to confront the woman versus leaving it with their husband or their man? Because it's about their relationship and what they chose to do.
I chose to confront her in a way that was not confrontational,
Okay.
but just to let her know that I knew.
Mm.
Because she was too close to comfort, too close for comfort in situations in my life and his life. So I knew what it looked like to go after the woman, and I had already dealt with my husband. So by going to her and letting her know, and what was so ironic about it is that when I went to her and told her, and she said she was grateful that I knew, and she thought that he had told her. So for her, she was thinking like, oh, well, that means he wants to be with me since he has told her about me. And so all I did was she said something about us getting together. And I says, I'm done with it. I'm going to leave it at the altar. And I walked away. I said, don't call my house, lose my number, a few of the things. And I walked away and I went to the altar. I was messed up at the altar. So a couple of things had happened earlier because I had went to see the TD Jakes. That when this was happening, I was at TD Jakes conference. And I'm there looking at all of these women wailing and having issues. And I'm thinking, oh, I'm wonderful. I'm married a year. My husband is at home. I'm not worried about him. All that. And some other things happened while I was there because I set up the trip. Everything was on my credit card. And so money got all kind of messed up. And one of the other ladies stepped in that I know to tell me that she would help me because I was just distraught. And I was trying to get in touch with my husband to tell him what was going on. And that's kind of how I ended up knowing something wasn't right. That's what led me to, once I got home, to figure out something wasn't right.
Okay.
And so at the altar crying, she thought I was having issues about what had happened at TD Jakes. So, nobody really knew what I was going through as far as the woman. They just thought it had something to do with the trip, which was a good thing. The look of it was a good thing, know. And but your question was, why did I choose to go to her? Because I chose to go to let her know I knew, not to say he lied to you or anything else. And then just because they both were teachers, and the thing, my pastor sat them down from the ministry and talked to them. And then when he talked to John and I, when they brought us in for counseling, and the first thing he asked John was, do you want to stay married to her? And then he asked me, did I want to stay married or did I want to work on it? And of course, my answer was yes. And like I told my pastor, I waited for 40 years, to get married. And I knew from watching other marriages that things could happen in a marriage. And I knew that I would be the one that would be ready to forgive if that happened to me. And I believed that God needed to do that for him in order for us to have our 20-year marriage. God had to show him. He had to show him through me even though he'd been married 3 other times, and they weren't long marriages. He was married 5 years, 1 year and 1 year, and then 11 years later he met me. And when we got married, I told him, I said, I will be your last. I said, I will be your last. I said, there's nobody like Dana. God prepped you for me and me for you.
Dana, thank you. Thank you so much. I want to pivot a little bit before I wanted to go in a different direction. People, as you said, we get married. You had an expectation of the reality there would be challenges. And people sometimes say, well, I mean, I say it for better, for worse, but not that worse. What made you want people? Well, actually, let me back up a little bit. For someone who doesn't know, what does being sat down mean, and what is a Sunday school teacher? I don't want to make an assumption that everyone that is listening to this conversation has the same faith or belief or understands what those terms mean. As you said earlier, when we're talking to people, making sure we're on the same page. So what is a Sunday school teacher, and what is being sat down?
Sunday school teacher was Sunday morning for Sunday school, they taught a juniors class, him and her together. They had about 10, 15 students, junior high students, boys and girls in their class. Okay. And they were both the Sunday school teacher of that class. And being sat down meant that position was taken away from them for 6 months or something. Like, my husband never went back. He never went back to the teaching, but she did, but he didn't.
Thank you. And if I understand correctly, when people are doing something that doesn't represent the body of Christ and they're in a leadership role, they're generally sat down to give them an opportunity to deal with their humanity, deal with their relationship with God, address the things that were done, not looking for people to be perfect, but to at least be honest and be striving towards this place where I am following Christ. Oftentimes I'll hear people say, I can't believe God let that happen to me. I was a good Christian. I'm doing the stuff that I need to do. I don't want God to talk to me anymore. Did you go through that with John? And if so, or if not, why?
I just said, why not? And why not me? I never asked God why. Because I thought of it as, why not me? Okay. And then I looked at it as God used me as a vessel to show other women, because see, at the time I didn't know until maybe like, let's say a month or so after this, one of the deacon's wife said to me, Dana, there were 4 other couples going through the same thing that you went through at the same time. And she just wanted to acknowledge to me that it just didn't happen to me. Not with that same person, but I'm just saying 4 other couples were going through infidelity with their spouse the same time that I was going through it. And and some of them didn't make the same decision that I made, where I made the decision to stay with my husband and move forward to make it work better. And like I told you earlier, I felt like that what happened made him a better person, made him truly, because when my pastor and I had a very good relationship. I skipped that whole part where that night I called him and told him what happened. I called him and he said, hold on, let me call you back. And he called me back and he had me go through everything, tell him the whole works. Because before we got married, I went to my pastor and told him I thought that there was an issue with her. Right. And so my pastor told me, why would John go for a hamburger when he got steak at home? That's what he told me. So a year later, when I called him at 12 o'clock at night, all I said was, Pastor, he ate the hamburger.
You're going to say something about hamburger.
And my pastor, he said, okay, Dana, are you okay? I said, yes. He says, where is he at? I said, he went to work. He said, give me a little bit and I'll call you back. He called me back within 30 minutes and he had me just tell him the whole story of my version of the whole story. And then he said, I'm going to call John and I'm going to talk to him. Are you okay with that? I said, I'm fine. You can tell him I told you I'm fine. And I remember when John came to me and told me, he said, John started crying because here's Pastor calling him, saying whatever he said. And he said he felt like he knew, I can't remember the words that he told me of how he felt, but that's why I say that situation changed who he was, because he was really a good guy in the church. He was a really good guy in Christ. He believed in God, and he felt like he was being taunted, or like he didn't have no control over what happened. Even though he did have control, that he didn't, and that he was stupid or whatever, and just to know that his own pastor could come to him and talk to him, and it scared him at the same time, but it made a better. And then I could say about maybe a year or so later, my pastor took him off the door. He was an usher. He was ushering, took him off the door and put him into deaconship. So when he died, he was a deacon when he died, like 10 years later, whatever it was. We were married 20 years.
I hear redemption. I hear redemption.
Yes.
I hear there is something about when you have fallen short and you receive forgiveness and you have a true repentive heart and you make a turnaround. And when sometimes people say, well, I said I was sorry. When I hear the word, when I hear the word repentive, I hear someone that's making a turn to not do that again. We may have had bad patterns growing up. We may have had bad examples. We may have thought that's what you're supposed to treat somebody and do different things. But we get that opportunity to change. And it sounds as if John took that opportunity to make a change and be a better person, to be a better man, to be a better husband, to be a better follower of Christ.
He was. I was even able to tell her that thank you, and that because of that he was a better person because of that situation, for whatever it was, whatever happened, however it came together. And they also worked together too. I forgot to tell you that. They worked at the same place, not together, but at the same place. So there's a lot of things, temptations that happened for him. And he thought he was being a good guy helping her. And then the whole time she was manipulating him and he didn't realize it. So, no way I could tell you the whole story, but yeah.
Yeah. And when we put ourselves in spaces for things to happen, no one is innocent in those particular acts. We have to be accountable. And it sounds as if he broke a pattern that he had been existing in for quite a while in life. Now I'm sure when you thought about getting married, did you think that would be something you would deal with, infidelity?
I said that at the beginning. I said that when I knew that when I got married at 40, that there would be the possibility of that happening in my relationship. For one, because it was my first marriage. And for two, I was his fourth wife. So that meant that he was a common denominator in all of those marriages. So that meant something had to happen, right? Now, I don't care how good I am, how cute I am, how cute my figure is. What I would tell him, the P don't have a shape. The P don't have so don't come to me with, well,
this is not TikTok. We can use real words.
The pussy don't have a shape. Yeah. That's what I told him. When he started telling me, well, you see, she's big woman. And I said, what does that mean? What does that mean? And what are you trying to tell me? Because I wasn't saying, well, she looks like this and I look like this. And why did you choose this? And why did you choose that? I was trying to tell him that down there is all the same.
It is. For
a man.
Yeah. When you stop and look back in life that you've experienced, and if you had an opportunity to talk to Dana the night before your wedding to John, what would you tell her?
What would I tell Dana? I would tell her I was proud of her, that she waited, and that I got what I believe that God gave me. The man, he never said he was going to be perfect. Never said that I was going to be perfect. Never said that the situation was going to be perfect. So it was always as a child. But how we say we want to get married and have children. But I already had my children. I already had my home. I just didn't have a husband. My children were out of wedlock. I would have told her on her wedding eve night day that I kept my promise to God and he gave me what I asked.
Beautiful. What are some of your favorite memories about being married to John?
Just knowing he was here. Just knowing he was somewhere in the house, had his man cave, and I'd be doing me. Traveling, our motorhome, we had a lot of things we did together. I fished. He taught me to fish. First time he took me fishing, I was hooked. He thought outside the box. He thought my thoughts. He would do the stuff before I even said it. So we were in tune with each other.
Wow.
So those are things I really, and the bar is set so high for the next person to come in my life. Somebody told me Well, at least you had one. But I believe I could have another.
I'm going to pause. What were the fences that John jumped over to get close to you?
My beauty, my outer appearance, because his thing was I was so beautiful or whatever. What I see in him. So once would tell him stories about what does my beauty get me? What does my beauty get me? Why did I have to sit back for three? Because everything I chose was wrong. So beauty had nothing to do with it. I'm smart, So he realized he had to the things like when I say he jumped through hoops to get to me, earlier I said he painted my house. He was cutting my grass. He was taking my boys, doing man things with my boys. He was jumping through anything he needed to do just to get in space with me so I could have a comfort to know I had somebody who was dependable and reliable for me. Because I told you I had built fences so high, like I kept telling everybody, he's a nice guy, but I just don't like him like that. Even though he was doing all these things. So he did many things. Some things I probably will never know unless his brother or somebody tells me. I heard a lot of backstories, because all the things that were going on. Why do you keep going back over there? Why do you keep, I make homemade rolls and he made homemade rolls. And I went away. He sent me to California to see my mom. And when I came back, he had a special dinner made for us. And when I walked in the kitchen and I lifted up these tiles, there were these rolls were rising. And I remember turning around, put my hand on my hip and said, what woman you had in here in my kitchen? And he was like, what you talking about? I said, who did these rolls? He was like, I did. See, and I didn't know. I was like, what you mean you did? Dana, my mother gave me all the tools that a woman had because my dad was a drunk and he didn't give me no tools but fishing. That's what he told me. And so then when he would make his rolls, and as the months went by, he'd make rolls, I make rolls. So finally I said, let's put our recipes together, pick the best of yours, best of mine. And then my mother named them J and D Heavenly Rolls. And for the rest of the years, we made and sold rolls, homemade rolls.
You sold those?
Yeah. And they sent them across the country, everywhere. Yeah. Gifted
Wow.
There were many people. We have stories. The labeling, my brother was going to do the labeling for it. And it was going to be clouds. And the clouds were going to have little stories on them from the people who would eat our rolls and the different things that they would do. Because some people would hoard them. Some people would take them and hide them and stuff like that. And so we used to hear so many different stories about our rolls. To this day, people have said stuff to me. I got the last rolls that John made, and stuff like that. And she just told me that maybe like a few weeks ago. Lady, I do her hair. And she was like, she said, that's what I remember. He was so tired. He was in there. He did work. And because the roll process is like a 10-hour day to make from start to finish.
Wow. You talk about John's last roles. You guys were together for 20 years. Do you mind sharing how John left this world?
A hero. My hero. He was sick most of our marriage, about 5 years in.
Dana, you talked about her having John's last roles. I would like you to share how John left this world, however you're comfortable with sharing that.
He left as a hero. For me, he was a hero because he was sickly most of our marriage. But looking at him, you didn't know that. You couldn't outside looking in, other than knowing when he was in the hospital and different things like that. But he, when we got married, and then after that year, the infidelity happened. When we got back together, I got pregnant. And at 11 weeks, I miscarried. And so he was 51, I was 41. I was excited because this was going to be my first child that was not out of wedlock.
Right.
And I was married. And so I was doing all the right things that I was supposed to be doing. That's what I was the most excited about. But anyway, when I lost the baby at 11 weeks, and he told me this is how we got the motorhome. He said he was going to buy the motorhome, and that was going to take the 18 years to pay for the motorhome, which it would did for us to raise a baby. So that the motorhome was going to be our baby. So when we bought it, I used to sell new used cars, trucks, and vans. So I'm the one that always, every 2 years, 3 years, I get a new car. So when we went to go buy the motorhome, he had the guy talk to me. He just put his hat on, sat back like this and said, talk to her. And so I negotiated. We got the motorhome, and he put in that insurance built in. So he knew, he must have knew he was getting sick. Built into that insurance that, like, what's it called when you, it's an insurance if you get sick where they pay the note.
Okay.
Okay. So he put that in there. So that made the payment like probably a couple $100 more a month. And so he worked it out with his credit union because they told him to go get whatever he wanted to get. And he made 2 payments a month on it. It will automatically just come out the check. So for 5 years, this was going on. And then he got sick. And he had to start on dialysis.
Mm.
And for 2.5 years, he was on dialysis. And after the 2.5 years, he received a kidney. And he had that kidney for 9 years. And at 9 years, I didn't know this at first, but the kidney was only slated for 8 years. And when he got it, they didn't tell me that. Or if they told me, I don't remember that part. But anyway, at 9 years, he had to go back on dialysis. And at this point, he's 69 years old.
Mm.
I knew in July of 69, when he had to go back on dialysis, that it's going to be very hard on him because it was 9 years later. He was a lot older. And I know the kind of stuff that happens when you're doing dialysis. So prior to that, he had like aneurysm on the aorta. He had just everything he had went through, and was why I call him my hero, because everything, every sickness, illness he went in for, other people were not leaving the hospital, had died, the friends and people that we knew, but he was coming out.
Mm.
And but when he got back on the dialysis, that was like in July
July what year thing?
of 2018.
Thank you.
When September, October came, it was before Thanksgiving, he was having a lot of pain in his foot, and ended up the circulation because he was diabetic. And we ended up finding out that they wanted to do an amputation of 2 of the toes.
Mm.
And so when they did the amputation of the 2 toes in the hospital, he's thinking everything's all good. And the doctor's saying they think that they might have to do even more, like go up even higher, like the foot or whatever.
Right.
But before we went to the hospital for that surgery, I remember we were in the kitchen and he said, Dana, I'm tired of going to the hospital. And I just, oh, honey, I said, and I walked up and I kissed him. I said, you're the strongest man I know. You get through everything. You are going to be all right. You're going to be okay. Because that's just how he made me feel from all of this other stuff that had been happening, that I really believed that he just going to be okay. So that was in December. He went into the hospital for that, and he didn't come out he died on January 10th. But prior to that, he coded 6 times before I let him go. On the first code, remember I told you he was going to nursing school when I met him and he dropped out? He was doing that because all of his sisters were nurses. And so they told me when the first time he coded to let him go, that Dana, we're telling you because we know what's going on. And I'm saying, God's going to fix this. We're going to get another doctor. I kept having excuse after excuse after excuse. And finally, and then I had never read his will thing that he had wrote. I didn't get to read this till after he died. When my sister then read it and gave it to me, he had wrote in the script, Dana, let me go. He had wrote that in the whatever that will thing is you do.
DNR, whatever, yeah.
I had never read that. So probably maybe if I had read that, he wouldn't have had those other 4 or 5 days but I knew the last, I went into the room and I'm all excited. And when I walked in the room, he saw me and he turned his head from me. And I remember looking at him and going, oh, honey, it's going to be okay. I said, we got a new doctor and this and that, and they're going to do this. And I saw a tear come down his eye. And I knew then that he was telling me he was tired. And then he coded later that day. And then I got with the doctors and signed the paperwork and said that made arrangements at a certain time that day, like 6 or 7 hours later, that we could pull the plug, and I would notify all the family and everybody that wanted to be there that could be there. And I have an app called Marco Polo.
I have that.
I could right now go back and look at all of that. I can look at the funeral, everything. I have all of that
Wow.
still on my Marco Polo in the cloud. And the actual last time that he coded was on there. I had the phone, and you could see me twirling around in the chair, screaming and hollering. And and then it was the most beautiful thing when he left us, though, because the room was filled with all people. I'd say it was about 20, 25 of us in the room. And my daughter sang a rap song. My son did a poem. My sister sang. His daughter, she was in Denver, so we had her on the phone, and she got to talk to him. He lived about 35 minutes after they actually pulled the plug, and people just got to come up and kiss him and say whatever, and it was beautiful. It was just
sounds like it.
peaceful. It was beautiful. And then his funeral, he was had an official, what they call an official funeral, because he was a deacon of the church. And so because he was in the army and everything, they came, did the salutes and all of that, and the flag, and put it over the thing. It was beautiful. And it was on the worst winter day of the season. And it was snow deep, and a lot of people still turned out. But it was beautiful. It was just
Wow.
beautiful. He had a wonderful homegoing. And a lot of people, because my husband was a recovering alcoholic for 30, I think he had just got his coin for 37 years.
Wow.
And so he had sponsored over 100 people into AA. So, because when he was supposed to get the kidney, about 40 something people came to the hospital to try to give him a kidney. And so they wanted to know, who is this John Hueston? All those people were trying to come, and that didn't match him, to give him a kidney.
Wow.
So he ended up getting the kidney from somewhere, a young person in Detroit, and he made this part of his story with AA. He was in his 40s. He was drunk and fell down the step, and that's how he died. So he used to tell people that he had a perfect match because the guy was a drunk. And so some kind of way he worked that in his stories when he would go do some of his stories
That's good.
for those 9 years that he had that kidney.
Wow.
And it really gave him back his life, those 9 years. We did a lot of traveling, and the last year, the last 2 years before, when he had an aneurysm and all this other stuff going on, I told him, let's let the motorhome go. And then I would just take him on cruises, or we'd go on train rides. We would do whatever, fly wherever we needed to go, because I knew that wasn't going to be. I did a lot of the driving on the motorhome. That wasn't that. It's just I needed my partner with me. I needed a healthy partner with me traveling. So we would do it the easy way.
Wow.
And that's what we did.
It sounds beautiful.
Yeah, it was good.
It's in 2019, so it is now 9 years. 7,
It'll
8.
be 5. It's 5. 19. This is 24. So at 25, it'll be 6.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, 2019.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, it's been 5 years. It would be next year. It'll be 6.
Yeah, like in 4 months.
Yes.
3 or 4 months. It'll be 6 years.
My husband passed in 2017. That was 7 years. So 2 years. So the 5 years of that. Mm-hmm. When we first started this conversation, I asked you, when you hear the word widowhood, you thought of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But how would you describe what being a widow is compared to what you thought it was? Because you said, it's something that people often have to experience. You were hoping you didn't have to. What is your experience of being a widow?
Well, my hope was that I didn't have to experience it, because he was 10 years older than me. And then 5 years into the marriage, he started getting sick. But ask me the question again, please.
What is your experience of being a widow?
My experience of being a widow is, the good part of it was he set me up that I didn't have to worry. I didn't have to worry financially that things were set into place because I'm just a low key person, so I don't need a lot. But my concerns were to make sure the house, this was paid, and that paid. And then everything else I could do. So that part was the good part of being a widow, that I was set up. But the other part was just being not having my mate, nothing to replace that. Some people try to hear up and replace that person, maybe just because, but I couldn't do that. I'm not going to settle. I think I won't settle. No matter what's been put into my life, I won't settle.
So, not talking about dating, your experience of being a widow, what is it like life without John? What is that experience of maybe the difficulty part? What is your experience have been your widow journey? I'll say for me, that first day, waking up and thinking Mark was no longer in this world, the idea that the man I had spent 32 years of my life with was gone, and trying to grasp life without him, me trying to understand how not to always say Tina and Mark, because I had said that for over 32 years, driving and getting ready to do something and wanting to tell Mark exactly what it was, and he was not going to pick up that phone. Me trying to exist in this world without him. When I think of things that people say, well, okay, it's been a year. Aren't you okay now? The first year, I was in some type of mental fog that I didn't even know what I was floating through. That second year, it was like, we got to do this again. My experience of being a widow, that experience, if somebody may not know, and it may help them to understand a friend who is a widow and understand what they're dealing with and what that may look like for them. Everybody's journey may look different. So your experience of being a widow that may help someone else that may be similar to you or have a friend that they're trying to help.
I think that's hard for me to answer because, and as far as helping somebody, I can share experiences, but for me, I was prepared. In my mind, in my heart, I was prepared for John to die.
Okay.
Because of the sicknesses that we had, and he overcame, and overcame. So I was prepared to look over at the bed and know that he was not there.
Oh,
I
okay.
actually moved over onto his side of the bed when he died. That's how I was able to relieve that empty space. I moved over into his position, and that's where I sleep still today, in his position, because he always slept closest to the door to protect the room. I only had little things that would mess me up. Was three things, main things. Because my husband was so sick and had retired and on disability, I was the worker, so I was out working a lot. I didn't go to the grocery store. I didn't wash clothes. I didn't change the sheets. I didn't put gas in the car. So those were my triggers. Meaning the first trigger I had was I got out the shower and I went to put my towel up on the door, and my towel was the only door. My towel was the only towel on the door. I had a meltdown.
Yes.
So my girlfriends came to me and said, after I shared what was going on with that, Dana, put some other towels up on the door. And I'm like, well, what difference is that? I wanted to define what they had said. But when I did it, it did help. Grocery store. I'd go in the grocery store, and because I really wasn't familiar with what everything was at, because he did all that and he'd bring it home and then I'd put it away so that I knew what all he had gotten off of our list, I would put it away. So in the store, I would break down and just leave the store. So then my son and I had have a car transportation business. So he does grocery stuff. So I would just send him my list for him to go to the grocery store for me. The other thing was gas in the car. I ran out of gas about probably 3 or 4 times the first 6 months, until my brother-in-law would call me every week and say, Dana, go put some gas in the car. Because I never even looked at my gas tank. Never. Because my husband washed my car and put the gas in the tank. I couldn't even tell you how much gas costs. I couldn't tell you how much milk costs. I couldn't tell you none of that stuff. I thought I was prepared for everything, but I was not, because there was a lot of little triggers. And it was just everyday simple stuff.
And those are things that before my husband passed, I never thought about things like that. I mean, for me, the mail, like I don't like opening mail. There's a pile sitting right here. I'm telling myself I'm gonna deal with today. And those things just catch us off guard. But you've mentioned, and also I think it's very important to know, people that are listening that are not widows and maybe widows that have children, prepare for the inevitable. Don't talk about if something happens. Have the tough conversation about when something happens, because it's important to have plans. It's important, like John wrote that on the sheet of paper, Dana let me go. That's part of end of life plans, because that eliminated you from having guilt, from having to feel like maybe I didn't understand what he wanted, even though you'd already made the decision. When you saw that, I'm sure it must have given you some type of peace or some type of resolve, knowing that you fulfilled his wishes. There was nothing else, just that last little piece, so there wouldn't be any head chatter. Oftentimes, people need to have those conversations so they know and they're aware of what the loved one wants. I think that's important to do.
I think at that point I was sorry that I hadn't read it earlier,
Mm.
that I put him through stuff that he didn't need to go through at the end. But sometimes a person's death is not about the person dying, it's about the person that they leave behind. And
Yeah.
they have to be they have to be ready and prepared for the death. So I, like I said, thought I was prepared myself, uh, but I really hadn't. And now it's, you know, I'm missing to this day. Like, it's gonna be 6 years. I still talk to him. I
Mm.
still thank him. I still ask him questions. I still feel his spirit.
That is beautiful.
I still
And
hear him fuss at me. I still hear him fuss at me. And I'll
mm,
go do whatever it was that he's fussing at me at the time that I know he would be fussing at me about. And I just go do it like, okay, you know. But we didn't fight. We didn't fight about like stuff, maybe like bills and stuff, like you can't bribe Peter to pay Paul and stuff. I say, okay, you take the checkbook, then you do it. And then you tell me who you robbing to pay. He hurry up and gave me that checkbook back.
how did
But
you
like I
find
said,
yourself? I'm sorry. How did you find yourself on TikTok?
after he died, there's some earlier TikToks on there where I actually share and hope other people see that it got me through nights, really. It got me through, I think my grandkids or something, I don't remember who introduced me to it, but I got on there and I like pantomime. I like to do karaoke. So my karaoke on TikTok was pantomiming other women's voices. And so I would find a lot of startup women on there nobody knew of, and I would take their song and I would pantomime that song and to give them more exposures. And then my son told me one day, Mom, you need to get out the bed with those TikToks, because that's a whole different TikTok. Because my beginning TikToks, I would be laying down or in my room in the bed doing these TikTok. So I was like, okay, thank you. So I ended up, it would be 3 o'clock in the morning. I would put a whole top on, some earrings and some lipstick, and then I'd do the TikTok. So that went on for about 4 or 5 months. And then I just moved off into other areas of the TikTok, where now I do trainings, I do teachings, I do motivational speakings, I do a lot of things. So, but it was my comfort zone. It took up a lot of time for me to edit and do things, so it kept me busy. I have people who would say, "I'm waiting on your next TikTok." Older ladies and stuff, my kids' auntie and stuff. I was like, "You really enjoy it?" I said, "You really enjoy it?" She was like, "Yes, I'll be waiting for your next one." I
Aw.
was like, "Okay." So I got a lot of motivating, and people. I wasn't doing something that was negative,
Right.
but I was doing something where people were like, "How is she doing that? I couldn't do that." You know.
That is amazing. There are so many people I have found on social media that has been part of their saving grace in a very difficult part of their life. And I think it's important to find community and find out what works for us, because it's so easy to stay in the bed. It's so easy to never get out. We do need something to draw us back into our own life, to experiencing and to living and doing something. And I bet you are not the only person that got up fully dressed to do a TikTok and needed to do that. at all. I can definitely relate to that. You have mentioned a couple of times. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I said many times I did that after that. Once my son told me, because I would talk to my sons about all kind of things, just like, if I were doing something, it's okay. This is not embarrassing you. I wanted to make sure that they would be okay seeing their mother. I didn't want people coming to them in negative tones about their mother. So I always, and that's why you see them when they come around me, they respect the fact, are you on TikTok, mama? Are you on live? Are you this or that? They bought me my so I could help, something could help me with what I'm doing. So yeah.
That is important. You've mentioned or alluded a couple of times to the idea that you could have love in your life again. You could date. What have you learned over the last years in being with John and being the age that you are now that will make dating look different for you than what it did before?
That will make it look different.
Mm-hmm.
It made it look different in itself than just in time.
Okay.
Nothing that I did, because back then it was so different, and now it's like with the social media and all of that other stuff. Even back then, people talk about back then, let's say 20 years ago or 25 or 30 years ago, there still was a form of apps and dating, but it was a low key,
MySpace.
MySpace and some other things people talk about. But for me, I'm going to stick with what I know. And what I know is that God's going to send me who he has for me. I just need to know that's who he is.
Okay.
Because if I try to do an app, maybe it'll be at a grocery store. Like the guy I just met a month ago, I met him doing something I love to do, playing pickleball.
Okay.
Love to play. My prayer is to have somebody who enjoys doing a lot of stuff, because I do a lot of stuff and I don't want to intimidate anybody. And so this gentleman that stepped to me is a short guy. He's like my height. And I'm thinking, he's coming at me? Well, for him to even come at me, I was like, well, I'm going to give him a chance, because you don't find many guys that's just going to step to you. So now I'm just in a different space right now trying to figure out, like, are you going to be okay with this? My one girlfriend asked me, are you going to be okay dating a guy that's short? And I'm like, I think I can. I have to know once, if we start dating right now, we're just in the texting phase. And because he's like 12 years younger than me. And I'm going, okay. So it's hard. It's weird. It's hard. But I'm just going back to what I know, like I said before, and just write out my prayer, write out my wants. Everything that I have and that I owned, I had a map. I wrote it out. Said what I wanted. This house, I had a legal pad. I wrote down 20 things, what I wanted, how I had to have it, when I bought my car. Everything I've done in my life was a plan. And so I believe that what God has for me next is in the plan.
Okay.
I just need to make sure that I know it when it happens. And so I don't want to discard anybody, whether you're short, medium, tall.
Did you hear that, guys? Just in case just saying.
Yeah.
She does not discriminate.
I just want their heart. I just want somebody who's going to be honest with me, who, that's what I want. It's not about looks, authenticity.
Authenticity.
No,
being authentic.
Ethnic. None of that. None of that matters, because it's a person's heart.
Okay.
I just don't want to miss them. That's all. I just don't want to miss them.
And you just got so like I do not want to miss it. I could see you just brighten it up with that concept of that.
There's a flashlight hanging in my car because my girlfriend says that when I fall in love or like somebody, I will be using the flashlight to find them in the daytime. So when she found out about this guy that stepped up to me, she came over and gave me this flashlight to calm me down so that I don't get excited about whatever, I was like, am I that bad? I was like, am I really that bad? They'd be like,
but
yeah, Dana.
There are some people that would feel like love is no longer an option for them. Some people would feel like, I'm 60 something. I just need to knit something and just hang out with my girlfriends and I'll be okay. What has made you not make? Why is that not your perspective?
They have to change their perspective. What I heard you say is some people are saying that they're not going to date anymore. They're not. They've got to decide don't lie to themselves, because some people are lying to themselves when they say that. They're just saying that to kind of cover up. But if you really look deep within your heart of what you want, you've got to speak it into existence. You cannot be negative about it. You can't. What comes out of our mouth is so powerful. Our words are so powerful. So speak, speak it into your existence, and it will happen. We just have to, and don't pray for patience, because God shows you all kind of ways to show you that you got patience. So
Right.
I don't even pray for that. I already know I have patience. I just speak for knowledge and to show me, and to what, and to speak through me, because I have slowed down when I speak, because I'm right off the cuff. I just say stuff. And so I've learned, I don't want to intimidate a man. My sister said what did she say? I de-escalate, something a guy. And then we were somewhere, she said, that right there, that what you just did right there. And I was like, that's what you call it? And so you never know your people around you who are watching you, who are observing you, who are paying attention.
When you thought about having this conversation with me, was there something you thought we would cover that maybe we didn't go into at all?
I came in with no expectations, because you came into one of my lives. Is how we met. And so I felt like if you saw something in me, even if it was just the word of being a widow, was enough for me. And so I always believe that God used me as a vessel.
Okay.
So in any aspect, because I told you I was on a dating show. It's been 2 years now, 2 years. And 2 years later, nothing has still changed from that. And that was worldwide, and was like, and I still didn't meet anybody.
Well, this is not a dating show, so this
No,
is.
I'm saying, but I was on a dating show, which was this is a podcast, but something different, where a lot of people could see me. I just believe there's special people for everybody. Some people say my person, I don't know about a person, a certain person. I believe that I could love anybody. I truly believe that any man. I believe that I could any man, because it's based on how he treats me.
I can see that. How are you as far as loving Dana?
Good. Okay. I'm very good. I'm active. I'm busy. I calm myself I do a lot of things like this. So I'm loving, always trying to love me. I'm introducing myself into doing things like dating me, going out on a date with just me, where I don't have to have a person. Because my thing used to be I could never go nobody with. I didn't like being the third person with my coupled friends and stuff like that. So I had to look at those things differently.
Okay. I have asked you a lot of questions. Any questions you have of me?
Yes, only one.
Okay.
I think I know that you're married and that you found love again. How do you maneuver that widow space with us and a new loving marriage of hope for us to get that and still be able to reach back and help somebody where I'm at?
Wow, that's a good question. Thank you for that. I'll start with why I do what I do. My current husband, had a cousin that passed, and he had a wife, so she is a widow, and I reached out to her, and it was his birthday, and she posted happy birthday to him, and I texted her and I said, hey, I saw it's his birthday. Do you want to talk? Because I know what it felt like on my husband's first birthday. I will never tell another widow I know how you feel, because how you feel is unique to you, being a unique individual, and your spouse. I can definitely relate. I can definitely remember my own experience, but I cannot say I know how you feel. And I spoke with her, and she said, oh, I'll text you tomorrow. And I said, well, you want to talk now? And I believe she called me before I feel like I had hit send. And we were on the phone late into the night. And I tap out about 8 or 9 o'clock. Anything after 10 p.m., I'm not sure what you're getting out of my mouth. But when we got off the phone, when we were talking, I remember being able to give that gift of being able to share how you feel, to know that you're in a safe space. You don't have to explain the widow perspective, and somebody gets it. Somebody understood it. And when I hung up from speaking with her, I could hear God saying, what are you going to do about the next person? And I was like, ain't nobody calling my phone this late at night. I'm going to bed. But over time, God evolved that Widowhood Real Talk with Tina, this 501c3 is what he was talking about, this nonprofit to support people who are grieving, to create a safe space, have mental health events, provide content on 6 social media platforms. This podcast is produced every week. And to do those things, that was something God placed in my heart to do. And when I explained that to Fred, he said, okay. He said, you sound like you have a calling of something that you need to do. His only thing was, how could he help me? When I started a YouTube channel, you have to get like 100, and he was texting his friends like, she needs 100 people on her YouTube. Now he will tell me, like, we have Wednesday night as our date night, and Wednesday night is our date night. That I'm put down social media, put down everything we're doing. If we're going to go out to eat, we're going to watch TV, but I need to turn everything off. He will tell me when I'm up too late and doing stuff. He's like, you're going to be tired. You need to, pull back from all of that. I actually have a podcast that I recorded with Fred and another gentleman talking about dating and marrying a widow. He doesn't like a lot of being in front of the camera. He's like I'll do a video with his voice or with his back. Like, he does not want to be part of any of that. But he supports this. He is a very confident man. He is not jealous of my dead husband. He said,
he's a widow?
No,
Excuse me.
no.
He's not a widow. Okay.
No, my husband and I did a podcast with my husband and another gentleman talking about dating and marrying a widow, because him and somebody else both married a woman that was a widow. So I am a widow, married Fred. My children's godfather married a woman that was a widow. So both of them, I had a conversation with them talking about the experience of dating and marrying a widow. It was important. I'm also a person of intentionality. I had my non-negotiables. I needed to look at what was going to fit me. I'm a retired Army officer. There were a lot of men that were intimidated when I was dating them. I was like, say less because I'm good. It was okay with me. And Fred is easy to love. He is easy to want him to be the head of our household. He is easy to be in charge and follow him and do things. So if anything, it's him telling me to take care of myself and to slow down a little bit because I can start doing too much. But it's not been much of a dance to have to manage that. And I've had my network of people, my family, my friends, they have been on this course with me and have never left. 7 years later, I have remarried. And if I call one of them talking about Mark, they will never tell me, you're saying too much. Aren't you over that? They support me. And when I talk to so many widows and widowers and people tell them that 6 months or a year out, my heart breaks for their pain, for their loneliness. And if God has embodied me, encouraged me, equipped me to create this widowhood community that is going to bring people hope and encouragement, I take that charge. I take that charge.
God does not call the equipped. He equips the called. That's what he did with you.
He did.
He
and
equipped you.
I know this podcast will air later in December, but I encourage people that listen to this podcast to go to our website, widowhoodrealtalkwithtina.org, and look at the events that we have for the year. December 6th, we're about to have a winter shenanigans party here in Norfolk. It's a 3-day event. People are coming in town Friday night on December 6th. And then we have activities December 7th and then partial activities December 8th. We have events because community is important. I was just out in California visiting my daughter and was able to connect with 3 other widows that I've met on TikTok. And I obviously advise you to be careful. We met in public places. You don't want to, think you're meeting somebody and put yourself in harm's way. Make sure somebody knows where you're at. But community is so helpful. And I think that's what has drawn people to TikTok. It's just not you post something and walk away. With TikTok, you're getting that personal engagement. You're getting to know a person for who they are. So I know that it is God carrying me and equipping me through this process, and I'm just submitting to his will and doing.
Okay, as far as that question, I asked the same. How long after your husband died did you meet him and marry?
Mark passed in 2017, and Fred and I got married in February 19th, 2022. And we dated 3 years before we got married.
And so when you found him or knew it, you were comfortable, you were okay, you weren't like worried that it's too soon or nothing like that.
So my late husband had a lot of cardiac issues in his family. He was certain that he was not going to leave this world and make it to 60. We talked a lot about what my life would look like in his absence.
Okay.
There was a lot of conversation about, I want you to date. I want you to get married. I want you to be happy. So whenever I chose that, I didn't have to feel like, in my head, he died. I am single. Whatever that looks like from there on, I fulfilled my marriage vow. I was a faithful wife, not what I signed up for. But who dare you to judge or make assessments of when I decide to do something with somebody else? There are people entirely married stepping out on their spouses. So miss me with that as far as that would go. So I never had anybody come to me and say like what that would look like. For me, what was the triggering point to think that I wanted to start dating? It had been about it was that first Christmas, and I was staying with a friend, and she had been single her entire life. And I was hanging out with her and spending the night at her place, and I put a glass down on her coffee table, and then she started rubbing it down and doing something. And I was like, how long before you don't know how to have space with somebody else because you're used to everything being your way? That thought came to my mind. And I remember being in her bedroom, and I went to blackpeoplemeet.com and I pulled up the website. I said, it's time to make a dating profile because in my mind, if I stayed single too long, maybe I would just be set in my ways and wouldn't be open to sharing space with somebody else. I mean, that led to much of nothing, but it did just allow me to just start talking to people because I'd only been with my husband for 32 years. The idea of dating somebody holding my hand, let alone straight up kissing somebody, was just like bizarre. So that was a good way for me to just kind of judge myself and start that concept. I had dated this one gentleman. He lived in Virginia while I was in Pennsylvania. I was preparing to move to Virginia. It didn't work out, but it let me know that I was in a good place mentally. I have done a lot of work on myself with my mental health, my mental wellness, my fortitude, who I am, and my faith. So when I did meet Fred, it was the right time. There were no regrets. I mean, was it like to hold somebody's hand and to kiss somebody? And he was so kind. He waited when I was ready to kiss him. He was not rushing me. Very clear about the do's and the nots in that, like you were with John up front. It was like, yeah, but also I had a good marriage. And I told myself, Tina, I don't want you being thirsty and being desperate out here and wind up with something worse than what you had before. If being married to Mark was going to be the last relationship, I was prepared to accept that. And I was going to be okay with that. But if I did know I had the capacity to love again, and if it presented itself, I was going to take it.
I just want you to tell Fred I love his name. That was my dad's name.
Oh,
I'm just looking at my dad now, Fred. Every time you say Fred, I just smile because my dad's been gone 14 years, and too many days go by that I don't talk or reference him either.
Nice. And unbeknownst to me, Fred's middle name is Mark, my late husband's first name. And I was like, okay, I considered that as a sign, like saying, okay, right, move forward with this. So yeah, thank you for those questions. Thank you for agreeing to have this conversation. I will let you close out this discussion, whatever you'd like to say to the community that is watching and listening.
Be ready. Be ready for your person. And like Tina said, got to be happy with ourselves first before we bring anybody else into it. And I just thank Tina for the opportunity to even ask me the questions. Like I said, I didn't come wondering or worrying. I just believed that God was using me as a vessel and giving me the opportunity to be seen. And like my son always tells me, Mama, God sees you.
Dana, thank you for being here. Widowhood, I'll see you next week.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you for spending another episode with Widowhood Real Talk. If you found the contents of today helpful, share the episode to anyone you know who may need it. Subscribe to the show and tune into Widowhood Real Talk each week. Then visit widowhood-realtalkwithtina.org to join the community and access additional resources. Remember, you are not alone in this journey.